compass here, Black Voices. We have plenty of copies. Please make sure you take a copy when you leave. But it's a very important contribution to the dialogue and to your overall perspective. If you haven't looked at the 250th from this standpoint, you haven't looked at the 250th. So, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our founder and chairperson, Charlotte King.
Thank you, and I want to, along with Joe and the rest of the board, welcome you all to this particular town hall. For some reason, I'm always at tears when I think about the 250th celebration of America. Just like I recall that Frederick Douglass talked about what is the 4th of July to a slave. And so I've been thinking, what is the 250th Black America? One thing I know about Black America is I know it about myself, even with all the political problems that are going on now. I am reacting as an American, which surprised me. I'm not reacting as a woman. I'm not really reacting as strongly as a Black person, but as an American. Black people celebrate America. They are some of America's best patriots and best citizens. They have been trying for 400 years to be equal partners with the rest of America, and they've been trying for 400 years or more to say we are entitled to all that we were promised in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. In preparing for this, and I had little notice, I went to the computer, as all of us do, and to look at Black people's contribution to America. And I was amazed at the number of people. And I just want to read a few of the names, if you don't mind, because I forgot them. And if we had time, I'd ask you to add to them. But it says something about our contributions to this country. And when I think of the 250th, I think the 250th is possible. The wealth of this country, the greatness of this country, the power of this country, the potential of this country was all built on the back of enslaved people. Enslaved people who tried very hard to be patriots by going into every war, from the American Revolution straight up, to say, we are citizens. We want to fight for our country. And of course, many lost their lives. And in the later wars, many came back only to find that the oppression was still there. But let me just read you a few of the names that I had forgotten about. Of course, we have Barack Obama and LK, Thurgood Marshall, Muhammad Ali. These are the list of the most famous Black Americans who have contributed. Shirley Chisholm, Oprah Winfrey, and it just goes on and on. Toni Morrison, Rosa Parks, Colin Powell. In every aspect of America, we have contributed, and I hope today that would be the theme of today. That yes, this is SDARJ's way of celebrating the 250th, because we believe in celebrating the 250th. It's our country, but I want us to remember that from a Black perspective, the contribution that Black folks, and you might say, well, why are you treating them separately? Because we have been separate. We're still separate. We're separate in our communities, even in some communities here. We're separate in our governments, even in our governments here. So I ask all of us to keep in mind the powerful contributions that made 250 something to be celebrated. So I thank you for listening. Let's get on to our exciting panel discussion. And I welcome all of you. I'm very glad you're all here. Yeah.
I now like to introduce you to Marjorie Belmont. Marjorie Belmont is a lot of things. Yeah. I say, okay, which one do I say first? She's a pastor. She's a leader in the UMC church. She is well, not an editor, general manager of Black Voice, which is SDRJ's pride and joy. And the community's proud and joy. We have so much positive feedback. It's on this magazine. The only published magazine in Black Belt magazine in Delaware. There are no others. This woman manages the only one. And it goes all over the county. We do about 70,000 copies a year. So that's a lot. We have a reach of 17,000 per edition. And that makes us one of the top publications in terms of reach in Sussex County, if not the top one. So I'm going to give you to the lady who's making it all happen. Marjorie.
Due to a heel problem, I'm going to sit. I am Marjorie Belmont, and tonight it's not Reverend, it's Marjorie, but that Reverend stays with me all the time. I like to say by default, the general editor of Black Voices magazine, and proud to be the general editor. And I have a team, and I thank Ms. Charlotte King and the rest of the team that we work together. Question was asked, why did we decide on the title for the main issue, our county, our country, the untold story of Black America here in Delaware. We wanted to focus on the birthday of this country, of our country, not this country, our country, and not just focus on the country itself, but our county, because Sussex County has a lot to offer. And when you read our magazine, when you read Black Voices, you will see the various gifts of people that we have here in this county. I was born here in Sussex County, over in Selbyville, Delaware, little Selbyville. I graduated from Indian River High School and graduate of Delaware State University, and by the way, of other places. And so returning as a United Methodist pastor, being appointed back here in 2015, things have changed, but some things remain the same. But I want to say I thank God for being raised here. A lot of rich history here. And I hope that tonight that when we listen to our panel, we will hear not just the contributions that Black Americans have made here in our country, but here in our county as well. And so welcome. I'll continue to read our magazine, Black Voices, and pass it along to others. We are looking for writers. Since becoming a managing editor, I have tapped into a lot of our young people, young adults, and who have great stories. But we have seasoned, I don't say older, I say seasoned writers too. Everyone has a contribution, so please reach out to myself or Ms. Charlotte, and let us know what contribution, what article you would like to present. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Cliffon Howell. I am a retired public servant for the state of Delaware. I am also an adjunct professor at Delaware State University. I'm an adjunct professor of history and political science. The courses that I teach most are African American history. I'm here today. I'm going to talk to you guys about the erasure of Black history, or the attempted erasure of Black history. Ms. Charlotte, she talked about the sense of pride that is running through the country right now in celebration of this 250th anniversary. It's difficult for some people who look like us when folks at the highest level are purposefully erasing our figures. I don't know how many of you know, but they have gone to Arlington and have removed any references to Black soldiers in Arlington. They have removed in Philadelphia, of all places, they have attempted to remove any information about the enslaved Africans in Philadelphia at the time of the country's founding and other places as well. So having the ability tonight to speak on this topic is giving me an opportunity to get some stuff off my chest. I'm a visual person, so I want to paint this picture for you. As this country is celebrating its 250th anniversary, how do you do that if half of the members of the family are erased from the picture? See, we can't have an honest discussion about the 250-year story if 40 million Americans' ancestors are being treated as footnotes and not foundation for this country. This is not just history. This is about identity. It's about civic participation and the national integrity of this country. See, African Americans have been a part of this country's history since the beginning. We're a part of the fiber. Enslaved Africans built this nation physically and economically. We physically built the US Capitol, the White House, and we worked in those plantations that fueled the global cotton markets that make America the #1 economy in the world today. The gross national product in the antebellum South alone rivaled that of industrial nations like France. That was early contribution to this country. We were patriots. The first life lost for the ideal of this democracy was a Black man, Crispus Attucks, who raised a stick for democracy, a stick because a Black man couldn't own a gun. He did so while many other people that we praise and we celebrate were in taverns in Boston talking about revolution. He simply said, "I'm done talking." That's the birth of this democracy. But we've been in every single war and participated in every single war. In the Civil War, we had 180,000 Black troops in the Union Army. In World War I, we had masterful fighting units that helped liberate Europe, like the Harlem Hellfighters. In World War II, of course, we had the Tuskegee Airmen and the Buffalo Soldiers. Then we had our Vietnam veterans. And of course, we've had Black soldiers who have participated in the Middle Eastern conflict. We cannot forget these amazing individuals, and these individuals have demonstrated our patriotism from the very beginning. Let's talk about innovation. Inventors, and I hate, but I have to do it because this is an environment to teach, right? And that's what I'm kind of doing here. You can't take that professor out of me. So I have to use the nomenclature and the terms that work. But these individuals were so much more than inventors. But I'm just going to say from an ingenuity standpoint, people like Lewis Latimer, Garrett Morgan, Dr. Charles Drew, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, their calculations got America to the moon with good people. See, these are not Black achievements. They are American achievements. And these are not Black achievers. They were American achievers. So how does this affect our education, right? And how does the exploitation and the attempted erasure of Black history affect our education system? It's simple. It creates gaps in curriculum. See, in certain places and pockets in this country, they describe things like the transatlantic slave trade as migrant workers. They use terms like the War of Northern Aggression versus the Civil War. And the interesting thing is, for those of you who are not attached to the education system, the same publishers publish the books that make both references. It just depends on which region of the country
Right.
it goes to is what you read.
Right.
So you can't even say, oh, it's certain publishers. No, they're the same publishers. It's just the way they package the information and they send it to other places. And so you say, well, what's the big deal there? Anybody know what a poorly educated teenager becomes? A poorly educated adult. There's no magic wand. You don't throw a switch, and when that individual that was poorly educated at 16 years old, when that individual is 22 years old, they all of a sudden get it. It doesn't work that way. And a lot of that is what fuels and perpetuates stereotypes that exist. And it also fuels and perpetuates certain tropes about how folks live. Think about it. Education is the greatest indicator of the quality of life for all Americans. When we take a look at where African Americans and where people of color lag in places, in parts of society, all of them are influenced by education. And to get back to these curriculum gaps, right? You wonder how you could have a 30, 40-year-old white person who doesn't understand that wealth gaps that persist in African American communities are not because these people are lazy. That these things go back to the late 19th century. And then they persisted and they turned into things like redlining. See, if you don't have that foundational knowledge of what was done to keep these individuals oppressed and to economically hold them and stunt them, then you have no way of understanding today and in this current environment why it is as it is. And that is one of the hardest things. I have had to, in my adult life, I have had to grow patience with folks. I learned there is such thing as sincere ignorance, right? Folks who truly don't know, because I lived the youthful part of my life believing that most of these people I was interacting were conscientiously stupid, right? They were doing this on purpose. And it was the patience that came along with becoming an adult and understanding that that's not the case for everybody. And most of the time, that comes from a lack of education and being poorly educated in the K-12 school system. Also, right, our education shapes some of our history. You guys know for decades, there were more Confederate monuments than there were monuments of Black people. Can you imagine that? Guess what? For a lot of folks in a lot of places, they didn't have to imagine it. They walked past these things, right? What do we lose when Black history is erased? Empathy. Students who don't learn shared history are less equipped to understand those experiences of their fellow citizens. Becomes policy ignorance as well. Voters who don't understand redlining and the GI Bill's radical exclusions or school funding inequities cannot make informed decisions at the ballot box. And economic blindness. We cannot address the racial wealth gap if we pretend it materialized out of smoke. And then, of course, there's missed innovation. HBCUs have produced a disproportionate share of Black doctors, lawyers, engineers, and leaders, yet they remain chronically underfunded. There's also a ripple effect. A child who never learns that Black Americans helped invent America may grow up believing that those communities have contributed absolutely nothing. Also, know and understand, this is not a Black problem. This is an American problem. Other countries, they view Americans as Americans first. Their disdain for Americans and their thoughts about Americans, they don't separate them first the way that we separate and the way that we live siloed, right? I'm not going to use segregation, right? That's a legal term, right? But the way we continue to live siloed in many communities, other countries don't do it that way. So now at 250, we got to have a call to action. We need to have comprehensive mandatory Black history curriculum. I love that in this state in 2021, the legislature passed House Bill 198, which I was one of the many authors of that. But I also have concerns. Many of you may not know. There's no teeth to that legislation. There's nothing that holds a district accountable if they don't adhere to the tenets of that education. So what my grandfather would have said, and I did neglect to tell you all in the onset that I'm a Lewis boy. I'm a Sussex County boy. I was raised right here in Lewis. What my grandfather would have said is that was pacification. They gave you something to put in your mouth that has no nutritional substance. Right? And that's not a knock on our legislators, because I was certainly a part of what it took to get that legislation over the hump. And it wasn't easy. You would have thought it should have been easier. So that's not a knock on them, but it is a call to action for us. We got to do more. We got to get some teeth in that. And another thing about that, right? Before retiring, my last stop was with a school district, one of the larger school districts in the state of Delaware. One of the neat things, I was a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. The state does require every district to submit a report on what their adherence to House Bill 198 is. That's the Black History Law. Check this out. Look at that report. It gets thinner as it goes south. I can tell some of y'all have seen that report already. Anybody surprised? It gets thinner the farther you go south. So that needs teeth for sure. I just want to say this, and I don't want to hold more time, because we want to make sure that we have time for folks here. It's a time, the 250th is a time to celebrate. We're all Americans. But at the same time, we got work to do. Thank you.
Before we go to our next panelist, the Sil, we're not doing order seating. We're not doing this order. We're not in order to seat.
Good.
Food. For those of you who order food,
Listen.
we don't sit here and watch your food get cold. You can go and partake now. Go right here. Feel free to come and get your place. It's okay. Not disruptive. So if you order food, feel free.
These plates for people. And I also have some more orders for people who would like to make an order. And I have a store, but I do have about 6 people that I know for a fact. Maybe they're 7 or 8. Okay.
Where are my slides next?
Yeah, then.
That the clicker to work.
Then we'll just do it for you. Just to. Okay. Go ahead. Oh, Darlene asked, would it be easier for you to deliver the food?
Deliver it to who though?
The person that says they've ordered.
Oh, okay, well, I can do that, but the rest is just, I guess, first come, first served, and then whoever else wants to order.
Yes, that I'll take care
Okay.
The folks at home, we're taking a quick break as we pass some things around. We'll be right back.
Okay, is anybody hungry? You know? Everybody seems so shy, I don't know. Sitting on eggshells. Probably before it gets cold. That would probably be the best.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Wolford. I'm a local historian. Joe gave me the challenge.
Of that one.
I thought I just talked you loud enough. Hello. Good evening. Joe gave me the challenge, first of all, of speaking for 10 minutes, which is the first challenge that I have to deal with. And then he gave me the challenge of our country, untold stories of Black Delaware, which is another great challenge. So I have to tell you about something you don't know, which is going to be a real challenge. And Delaware before the end of slavery, life, labor, and community among free and enslaved Black Delawareans before emancipation. So I am telling the story before emancipation, and a story which no one has ever heard before. And I have to do it in 10 minutes. So give me the challenge. So I will accept the challenge. I'm going to tell you about the godfather of Kent County, which is a person you've never heard of because I made up the title of Godfather of Kent County. And now if you go to ChatGPT and type in Godfather of Kent County, it'll talk about Joshua Parker. I'm going to talk about Joshua Parker, the richest man in the state of Delaware when he died in 1900. But let's start off with where history has to start off with. We assume that in the history book is the white history, and then we have to add the black history to it. But the truth is that if you go to the library, you only find old history books of rich, famous, powerful white guys. Okay? Only folks that are there. And if you want to say, well, how many white guys were in Marble? There are only two guys from Delaware in Marble. This is the National Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C., and Delaware's most famous founding fathers, Caesar Rodney. Okay. Caesar Rodney and John Middleton Clayton. And so these are the folks you find in the history books. So we have to go back and find other black folks and put them in the history books. And we're going to try to put them in history books alongside of Caesar Rodney and alongside of John Middleton Clayton. William Penn landed in Old Newcastle in 1827, 1682. And he brought with him members of the Clayton family. So that's how far the Clayton family goes back. We're talking about John Middleton Clayton, who was born in July 24, 1796. And he, as was Caesar Rodney and other folks of the day, he was a slave owner. But in 1831, he freed his slave, Isaac Parker. But again, the question becomes, well, what happens when you free a slave and he has no land and he has no money? Basically, he is free and probably lives on the same plantation or estate where he was, but he's able to produce a family. So Isaac Clayton went out and got married and had a son by the name of Joshua Parker. Isaac Parker stayed on the plantation and became the body servant for John Middleton Clayton. Body servant is shines his shoes, cleans his clothes, gets his horse, cleans out the slush buckets, whatever the slush buckets were, and takes care of him as his personal servant. Everyone wanted a body servant like John Clayton had. John Clayton wasn't going to give up Isaac, but he said, I have a son, Joshua, and you can have my son Joshua as a body servant. So at the age of 14, Joshua Parker became a body servant to the most famous and powerful folks in the city of Dover. And John Manlaw was one of them, who was the president of Farmers Bank. He went on to become body servant to John Fisher, who was a lawyer and the cousin of John Middleton Clayton, and again was a very powerful lawyer and politician in the state of Delaware. John Middleton Clayton, in addition to being senator from Delaware, was also Secretary of State of the United States, and again took his servants with him. Isaac went with John Middleton Clayton, and Joshua went with again his master or the one he was providing services to. In 1852, Joshua Parker came back and was the maitre d' or the head server at the Capitol Hotel in Dover, Delaware. And again, he had the skills of being a body servant, which just meant he made very rich and powerful white folks feel like they were very rich and powerful. Okay, so he had that particular skill. His family again was very successful in Dover. His mother was a caterer. His father was a set up post. His mother had an ice cream parlor in Dover. They were contractors and they were leaders of the community. And Joshua Parker got some land donated to the community, but donated to Joshua Parker to build the first school in the city of Dover for African Americans. He again, after the Civil War, because he knew all these very important folks, they were on their way to Washington, D.C., and they took Joshua Parker with him as a person who was receiving patronage jobs. So Joshua Parker became the bailiff in the courthouse of Judge Fisher in Washington, D.C. He came back and bought some land in Hartley, Delaware. He became the messenger in the Department of War. We're now back to using the Department of War. And again, was a messenger there. These are patronage jobs, and went on to become the administrative assistant to Judge Higgins, who was senator from Delaware. They're all the same jobs. They all look like body servants. We give them different names, but these are the jobs that Joshua Parker held. And in its time, these were powerful jobs and well-paying jobs. And again, the way African Americans had to work their way out of slavery. Higgins again was ousted by the DuPonts. The DuPonts came in, took over Delaware politics. So the folks down here in Dover were out of office. And so Joshua Parker had to go back to the farm. He again worked in the Republican Party. He again was a politician of his day, where he was buying and selling votes, and someone got upset with him for selling votes or getting black folks to vote the Republican Party for a $5 bill. So he was arrested, but he had political friends that got him out of jail. He again was the only voice for the African American community at the time, and again went to Legislative Hall and lobbied to get black folks public education, as we call it today. Here again, he was a member of the community and worked to improve the community, and again was the go-to guy, if I may say so. A person from Wilmington came down and tried to get the black folks in Dover to vote for the Democratic Party or for an independent black party. And this wasn't sitting very well with the Republicans or with Joshua Parker. And they chased, Brinkley was his name, chased him out of town. But because Joshua Parker was well connected with the politicians, he was just bailed out of jail the same time that he was put in jail for trying to kill somebody for, trying to vote other than the Republican Party. Joshua Parker again continued to organize black folks in Kent County to vote Republican. He was a candidate for what's called the #1 black job in Washington, D.C., a job which Frederick Douglass once held, which was the Recorder of Deeds job, but didn't get that job, but was still part of it. When he died, he writing his will, and he wrote his will, and he has William Jason, the president of Delaware State University, over his shoulder, and he left all of his money to Delaware State College, $10,000. Again, all of those riches were turned over to Delaware State to help education. Buried in Whatcom United Methodist Church, and for a while the valedictorian of Delaware State was given the Joshua Parker Award. If you'd like to commemorate Joshua Parker, he has a tombstone 6 foot high at Whatcom United Methodist Church. And again, he needs to be celebrated for his achievements and also for having achieved much in terms of wealth and in terms of power. Again, I tell you this story because as we talk about black achievement and black accomplishments and the things to be accomplished, we have to look at someone who went through this process and somehow overcame all the obstacles that were in front of him. And so again, we can use his life as a model to say, how do we overcome these things? And how did Joshua Parker overcome these things? And how did he become the richest black man in the state of Delaware? So we're going to open it up to questions afterwards. And if you'd like to know more about Joshua Parker, I'd like to share his life with you.
Hello.
On.
Well, hello.
Well, the one graphic said Dr. Marlene Saunders, Delaware State University Board. And I need to say that being on the board at Delaware State University represents only 3 years of my life. I have done much more. I've been a social worker for 54 years. I have been an educator. along with this young man, at Delaware State University for 30 years. Where I was a chair, I retired as chair of the social work department. And I have been an advocate for social change, and civil rights and equal rights for Americans of African descent. And along with that, I've had a universal orientation, which is about making sure that everybody, you know, has equal rights. So I need to say that. I also need to say that I'm also managing editor of a publication called Let the Truth Be Told. 4 women manage that, so you don't have the resources that Black Voices have, but that comes out quarterly. And if you are interested in receiving that, please give me your email address, and I will see that you get our August edition. When I was approached to participate in this, my topic was African American women in Delaware. And I said I would do that, even though I am not as expert on this population as other people in Delaware. But I do know something about the history of African American women in Delaware, and I'm going to share what I know. And I have a title, which is Empowered Delaware Women, African American Women, from Enslavement to Delaware Legislative Hall to the U.S. Congress. Because of meticulously documented research undertaken by scholars such as Ann Boylan, Patricia Collins, Karen White Smith, the histories of Delaware's African American women, notable and ordinary, are available to Delawareans and others who want and need to know about everyone who is a part of Delaware's history. The achievements of Delaware's African American women are important because they show how famous and everyday women rejected the racist ideology that continues to justify and sustain structural racism. They did so by uniting as an empowered, political, and action-oriented movement comprised of women who share and continue to share the universal experience of being an African American woman in a society that bases women of African descent. In keeping with this perspective, in 1831, Maria W. Stewart, an African American woman who unapologetically spoke out against slavery, said, and I quote, "It is no longer to be said of the daughters of Africa that they have no ambition, they have no force. By no means let every part become united," unquote. Black women mobilized in a variety of ways. This early movement represents the roots of Black feminism. During the period from 1890 to 1920, African American women in Delaware fought for the vote, political and civil rights, and end to lynching and Delaware's whipping post, and adequate standards for living. Motivated by these conditions of racial oppression, Black middle-class women, for example, entered the suffrage movement to gain voting rights not only for women, but Black men. Another solution to address these problems was to initiate the Black Women's Club movement, whose mission included advocating on behalf of poor Black women. By doing so, these she-heroes diligently held America accountable for the democratic values espoused in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Through United Voices, articles detail analysis of racial prejudice and Jim Crow laws and their impact on African Americans, they eloquently explain that the values and precepts in these documents legally apply to African American women and men, and in addition supported their focus not just on the vote for women, but humanitarian social justice for everyone. The history of African American women in Delaware includes the 1700s, when they were sold as enslaved laborers throughout the state, including an area known as, and I quote, 3 lower counties of Delaware, unquote. But enslavement and its legacy did not and has not stopped African American women in Delaware from positively impacting the lives of less privileged Blacks and advocating for universal social justice. In the face of anti-Black racism in the white suffrage organizations, Alice Gertrude Baldwin, Alice Dunbar Nelson, and Blanche Williams Stubbs met at Emma Gibson Sykes' home in Wilmington in 1914 and formed the Equal Suffrage Study Club. In keeping with a humanitarian orientation approach to seeking the vote for women, unlike white suffragists who advocated purely for the vote for women, Delaware's Black suffragists never advocated simply for vote for women, but participated in a larger ongoing freedom struggle. For Black women, the struggle for the vote included obtaining votes for Black men in the North, buttressed by the view that passage of the 19th Amendment would challenge Jim Crow laws in the South that prevented Black men from voting. But Alice Paul, president of the National Women's Party, the dominant suffrage organization, maintained that disenfranchisement was a race issue, not a sex issue. Wilmington's Black suffragists marked on March 2nd, 1914. The suffrage parade was led by Stubbs. However, Black and white suffragists marched separately. According to Anne Borland in her book, Votes for Delaware Women, they made diplomatic gestures to white suffragists, consistently advocating for a broad platform of racial justice. Only toward the end of the decade did Delaware witness the development of tentative cooperative efforts across racial lines, this time over the appalling housing conditions that Wilmington's Black population endured, an issue that Alice Dunbar Nelson had first identified in 1914 in her investigative reports contained in the SDARJ newspaper. Were Black suffragists successful? Yes, and somewhat. Following the 1920 ratification of the 19th Amendment, Black women in Delaware registered to vote enthusiastically, particularly in Wilmington, chose party affiliations, voted, and ran for office. In one district, Black and white women formed a coalition to defeat a racist anti-suffrage legislator, John E. Bull McNabb. In 1922, Black women switched to voting Democratic, which helped defeat U.S. Representative Caleb Layton, who failed to support federal anti-lynching legislation. As above noted, leaders like Alice Dunbar Nelson and Blanche Williams Stubbs formed pioneering organizations such as the Wilmington Equal Suffrage Club. Their work provided the foundation for the 24th Amendment, which outlaws poll taxes, in 1965, the Voting Rights Act, and in 1971, the 26th Amendment, allowing 18-year-olds to vote. In contemporary times, African American women creating organizations and motivating grassroots organizations to address the needs of African American women and communities might not describe themselves as Black feminists, but they have followed early Black feminists like Sojourner Truth, Anne Shedd Carey, Mary Church Terrell, Mary Bethune-Cookman, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, Angela Davis, and others, and founded or led organizations like Black Mothers in Power, founded by Sinead Darby, and convener of the Ella Baker Academy, the Coalition of 100 Black Women, and Delaware's Black Chamber of Commerce, founded by Ayanna Khan Flowers, as well as organizations like the Southern Delaware Alliance for Racial Justice, Untold, and the Black Agenda Group. These organizations actively and campaign to eradicate systematic birth disparities and train Black community doulas in the state, advocate for Black women and girls in areas of health, education, and economic development, and serve the needs of Black-owned businesses, provide economic opportunity, promote African-American history, and provide spaces for African Americans and their allies to formulate a Black agenda that addresses the unique needs of African Americans while attending to universal social justice. African American mothers who are not famous and did not have the time to participate in grassroots community meetings supported all men are created equal, and the notion that their children were not less than any other child because they are Black. Thus, they fought against segregation in schools. Consequently, Black mothers in Delaware made the decision to immerse their children in the battle for school desegregation. Here I am referring to the mothers of the Milford Nine, Sarah Beulah, who fought on behalf of her daughter Shirley to attend a segregated school in Hockessin, and also includes my mother, who enrolled my brother and me in Rose Hill Elementary School, where initially the white kids called us the N-word, coons, monkeys, and let us get off the bus first so they could see our tails. Believing in education as the ladder to success, Black mothers and their husbands made sacrifices so their children could attend college. For example, in 1960, Delaware State College, which was then Delaware State College, was an all-Black institution with a total enrollment of only 386 students. By 1980, that number had grown significantly. Graduates excelled as doctors, lawyers, teachers, social workers, ambassadors, business, and million-dollar contributors to Delaware State University. Black feminism, evident during the 1890 to 1920 period, provided what was essential in that it provided the foundation for Black women's advocacy, voice, empowerment-oriented solutions, and actions and political involvement. This point of view helps to explain the phenomenal 1,100% increase in Black female Delaware legislators between 1971, when Henrietta Johnson was elected as the first female state representative, to the 12 African-American women now sitting in the General Assembly. The senators are S. Elizabeth Tizzy Lockman, Senate Majority Whip, and Marie Pinckney. The African-American female representatives are Stephanie Bolden, Melissa Minor Brown, Kendra Johnson, Sheree Moore, Deshauna Neal, Medea Wilson Anton, Carrie Evelyn Harris, Sophie Phillips, Camilla Smith, and Alana Berry. For the first time, House leadership includes 2 African-Americans, women. And Melissa Brown Minor sits as the Speaker of the House, and Carrie Evelyn Harris sits as the House Majority Leader. Tizzy Lockman in the Senate is a Majority Whip. The humanitarian focus for equality is apparent in legislation sponsored by these women. For example, the Omnibus bill sponsored by State Speaker Minor Brown provides care for incarcerated women, which prevents the use of restraints on women in their second and third trimester, and in the 13th week immediate postpartum period. Provides access to dual services for pregnant and postpartum women in custody, develops bias and competency training for healthcare workers, requires Delaware Prenatal Quality Collaborative to create training guidelines for health professionals, and expands Medicaid access to include dual services. The efforts of African American women to achieve equal rights and social justice for both African American men and women, as well as their broader humanitarian commitment for justice for all people, stem from a history rooted in the construction of whiteness by white people in the late 1600s. This classification was designed to assign African Americans and their color to lifelong servitude and impose a caste-like status on their descendants, which prevails today. This legacy was evident in the refusal of white suffragists to support the social justice goals of Black suffragists, as maintaining their racial privilege ensured their superior position in society. The ongoing presence of racism and prejudice can also be seen in President Trump's portrayal of Black women, which reinforces harmful stereotypes that depict them as angry and unintelligent. In 1957, Dr. King said, quote, The road to freedom is a difficult, hard road. It always makes for temporary setbacks, and we are facing setbacks that echo the past, that are taking us back to periods reflecting America USA as a quarter for white people. These include voting rights under attack, voter suppression, a new wave of gerrymandering, proposals for household voting, critiques on the 19th Amendment, and hard rights and in general, hard-won fights for rights are threatened or lost. If you believe that this is not a problem for, not only for African Americans, but for all Americans, consider this statement made by Senator Schmidt, who's the senator from Montana, made at the National Conservatism Conference in 2005. And I quote, "When they tear down our statues and monuments, mark our history, and insult our traditions, they are attacking our future as well as our past. By changing the stories we tell about ourselves, they believe they can build a new America with the new myths of a new people. But America does not belong to them. It belongs to us. It is our home. It's a heritage entrusted to us by our ancestors. It is a way of life that is ours and only ours. And if we disappear, then America too will cease to exist. African American women who fought and are fighting for equal and human rights have white allies. These individuals need to stand with Black women for rights for all. Fight the power. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Ron Collins, and what a joy it is to be here and to learn so much about history. It's the sort of thing that you could never stop learning about, and I was so delighted that you mentioned the ladies, and it reminded me of Abigail Adams when she said to John, "Don't forget the ladies." And so much of our history is, as Clemon has mentioned, being erased day in and day out. And by the way, there's a book in what you said, and I look forward to, if you're not doing it, somebody else doing it, but there's so much richness in what he said. I think it's really extremely important. It is said that the dead live on the lips of the living, all right? And I just want you to know, I taught constitutional law for 40 years, and I taught Brown v. Ford hundreds of times. I never, ever heard of the Delaware case, and I never heard of Lewis Redding. And so what a joy it is to be here today. Because, you know, you can't take pride in your history if you don't know your history, right? And so I think we don't have to go far. I mean, let's just start with the Redding family and Lewis Redding. You'll see him, he's right there on the end, on the left, right? And there in the middle is Thurgood Marshall. And off two to the right there on the very end is Jack Greenberg, who is a star in the NAACP. And where did Thurgood Marshall send Jack Greenberg? He sent him to Lewis, all right, to work with, excuse me, he sent him to Delaware to work with Lewis Redding. So today, I want to talk a little bit about Lewis Redding and this remarkable family. By the way, there's an incredible book, I think it's long out of print, it was written 23 years ago, called Integrating Delaware, The Reddings of Wilmington by Annette Woodward Provine. It's just a remarkable book, and so much about this family. I have just a PowerPoint here, and I can't go through, I can't even begin to go through the outline of the achievements, the incredible achievements of Lewis Redding. Let's just start with his family, if you will. His parents were very well educated. Both of them went to Howard University. They were people for the time of means, not of substantial means. His brother, Saunders Redding, boy, you haven't heard about this fellow, right? In 1928, he goes to Brown University, and just amazing career. Teaching literature and what have you. And among his many books is one called Being Negro in America, written in 1951. That is a book that deserves to be reprinted, it is just so telling. And, as much as we talk about Lewis Redding, I was just amazed when I read about songs of that family. This is an incredible family, all right? Plus his two sisters who were school teachers and what have you. So wherever you look, the Reddings were just a remarkable family, and this history has to be so much a part of the story of race and racial justice and the contributions that African Americans have made in this country and also especially in Delaware. So let us just start, if we can, with the formative years. Remember, he's born in 1910. He's born in Alexandria. And he graduates from Howard High School, which was the only African American school in Delaware at the time. And he studied, Dr. Saunders, under Alice Dunbar Nelson. I mean, she's a remarkable woman, and you have to connect the dots. I mean, what would be a remarkable project is to start to connect the dots between all these incredible African Americans in Delaware. All right, and I just began. I mean, she was a noted African American poet. She was a noted journalist. She was noted political activist and what have you.
Paul
But-
Lawrence Dunbar's wife.
Pardon?
Paul Lawrence Dunbar's wife.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, okay. And I'm just learning more and more every day. My jaw drops. But when I first started studying about these women, I just did some cursory work. I thought, my God, Lewis Redding studied under her in high school. He graduates at the top of his class. And in 1923, ladies and gentlemen, he's admitted to Brown University. This is virtually unheard of, right? I mean, just unheard of, and simply merits, simply high grades and what have you. And he gives the commencement address at Brown University. I mean, it's just remarkable. The more and more you study about these people and this family, the more you would hear. He will teach at Morehouse College for a year or so, and then in the fall of 1925, he is admitted to Harvard Law School. Itself, again, unbelievable. I mean, this is 1925. In 1928, he's the only African American graduating in his class, and so it just continues and continues. Now, when it comes to the civil rights cases, which those are here at Delaware, I mean, the Delaware story is remarkable, and I can just tell you, in no constitutional law book that I know, and books that a lot of that are used in law school, not in a single one, not in any of them, does the name Lewis Redding into the Delaware cases appear. I mean, it's an amazing story. And this is without intentional erasure. This is just with negligent erasure, And so, and by the way, if we're going to talk about Lewis Redding, he wasn't, in so many ways, he was a rather dapper fellow. He wasn't a Nina Simone. I mean, if you've heard Mississippi Goddamn, he wasn't that. He was more like Billie Holiday, all right? He was calm, mild-mannered, but tough-minded, all right? He liked wearing Brooks Brothers suits. He smoked fancy French cigarettes, all right? He was quiet and mild-mannered, but boy, did he know how to pack a punch when it came to litigating cases. And so here we see him in August of 1950, Parker versus University of Delaware. And I'm pleased to say that last week, my publisher said that Grade signed off. I will be doing a book on Lewis Redding, Colin Sykes Sr., the famous judge from the Chancery Court here of Delaware that ruled in these cases, and Jack Greenberg. And so I'm excited about that. And I'm also excited about the fact that I will be doing a book with Shanta Wilkinson, my colleague, on the open casket funeral of Emmett Till. But let's get it back, if we will, to Lewis Redding. And there you see a photo of the man in his later years. Parker versus University of Delaware. That's before the Court of Chancery. Colin Sykes, young judge, here's the case. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the first case in the United States where segregation in a college is determined unconstitutional under the federal constitution. In no constitutional law casebook that is used in this country today will that fact appear. It's just amazing, all right? And that decision was never overruled at all. But, you know, Redding is not happy with that. He wants more. He starts with the college cases because he figured that was the best place to sue. And he's working with Jack Greenberg, who Thurgood Marshall had assigned to work with him in Delaware. And so in March of '51, he's concerned about what's going on at Claymont High School, along with Hoganson schools there in Delaware. And he takes these two cases again to the Chancery Court in Delaware, and again to Colin Seitz Sr. By the way, Colin Seitz' son is now the Chief Justice of the Delaware Supreme Court. And so, and it is amazing. It is amazing what those three, Lewis Redding, Jack Greenberg, and then the judge, now he's Chief Judge of the Chancery Court. And for the first time, segregation in middle schools and high schools is declared unconstitutional. And that decision is affirmed by the Delaware Supreme Court. Now catch this. There are 5 cases that go to the Supreme Court in Brown v. Board. All right. One of those cases is from Delaware. Yeah. Right. It's Colin Seitz' opinion. It's the litigation done by Lewis Redding and Jack Greenberg. Right. But of the 5 cases, only one rules that segregation is unconstitutional. Only one, Delaware, right? So this is just, you know, as much as we hear about Topeka, Kansas, we need to hear more about Delaware. We were the first, right? I mean, Delaware did have its issues, right? It had a provision in its state constitution about segregation in schools. We just signed the declaration, just the very last moment, right? Indentured servitude was a long part of our history, right? But it is against that backdrop that we see Lewis Redding basically working miracles in so many ways. So that case goes to the Supreme Court. It is affirmed by the Supreme Court in an opinion by Chief Justice Earl. Right? It's just amazing. And thereafter, Lewis Redding, for the next several years, will argue 11 civil rights cases, 11 civil rights cases, all of which he won. Now, how many of you know the name? It's part of our history, but part of it that's been erased or forgotten. But how many of you know the name of the name Boyles, Bryant Boyles? Does anybody know that name? Of course. Well, one good person. So thank you. Bryant Boyles launched the National Association for the Advancement of White People, all right, in Milford, all right after Brown came down. Thousands of people came to give money to this fellow, all right, all to fight Brown v. Board. And who's there on the front line fighting him, all right? Lewis Redding, all right, case after case. It's one thing to win in Brown, right? It's another thing to implement that, right? Is to turn words into action, all right? And that's exactly what he's doing. And this Bryant Boyles character, what a con man he was. Can you imagine, somebody in politics being a con man? Anyway, so and he collects all of these folks' money, right? And then the attorney general finds out it's all a scam. Right? He's collecting a lot of money. And meantime, what the whole idea is to get these school boards, all right, to refuse to integrate the schools. That's what he's doing. But in the 11th hour, he leaves Delaware, right? Because he's about to be indicted, and he goes to Texas where he murders someone. Right? Anyway, the National Association for the Advancement of White People is launched here in Delaware. And it's there on the fighting line at the school boards, at the district meetings, and what have you. Lewis Redding. And we lose him in 1998. He has a long life. And, in closing, I am reminded, when we think about how to how to remember someone like Lewis Redding, two things come to mind. Of course, you all know that incredible line from Sam Cooke. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is going to come. And I think what that line by Sam Cooke reminds us of is that you have to be in this for the long haul, right? You can't just be in it for today, all right? Justice and racial justice takes a long time. It's a battle that really never ends. Albert Camus once said in 1939, on the eve of Germany taking over the world, and certainly France, I do not give the human race more than one chance in 1,000, but I would be less than a man if I did not act on that chance. All right. And I think that's the kind of fighting spirit we need. And that's the kind of thing that I think is so important about the work that the Alliance and others do. And just yesterday, I listened to Bob Marley, Redemption Song. If you haven't gathered, I love music, right? And he once said, how long will they kill our prophets while we sit around and look and do nothing? And I think that's, in some respects, that's a good metaphor for what we're doing today. I would just close on this note, all right? If I can help out with Black Voices in any way, if I can help out with the truth be told in any way, count me in. And in terms of the Alliance, I would think one of the things you might consider to count me in if you do, and I'll get Johnson to work with me as well, because we're working on a couple of projects. But I think it's so important for young people, and this was mentioned earlier, it's young people to know their history. If the Alliance were to start a program like that, count me in, all right? And they may issue a certificate or what have you. But I think this would be a wonderful thing for high school students and college students. And there's a lot to be said, and we can start right here in Delaware with the Redding family and the incredible achievements that this family did and the things that they did for Delaware and the nation. So with that, thank you so much for having me with me.
I just wanted to, when you talked about his temperament, I wanted folks to understand why he had the temperament he had. As the first Black lawyer admitted to the Delaware bar, everything he did was under a microscope. Everything. We talk about how he dressed. He didn't want any distractions from what he was going to accomplish. And he had what James Baldwin described as a quiet fire. James Baldwin didn't make that quote about him, but he had a quiet fire inside. See, he knew he had to be one way because he was first. He was a trailblazer. But he also knew and understood when he sat down in his offices and when he worked on his litigation strategy, no one was going to come and be above him at that. And as Brown versus Board of Education goes, he was the most successful litigator on that team. Yeah. Folks talk about a dream team put together by a professional athlete in 1993, but the original dream team included Lewis Redding and the Brown versus Board of Education team.
And it would be 25 years until another African American was admitted to the Delaware bar. And so I couldn't agree with you more, but he still was chill. So thank you. Go ahead. It's time for the audience.
Okay, can I just make a, okay. Oh, I was telling, I was telling Jim that, I live right around the corner from the weddings. And, if you're familiar with a book called When We Were Colored.
Yeah.
It talks about how middle class and poor blacks lived in the same neighborhood. So I live right around the corner from the Reddings. I live down the street from Dr. Thumpton. There was Teachers Row. And we all lived together. Now, the thing about the Reddings is he was a damper person. I mean, he dressed nicely, but his whole family did. And there's Gwendolyn Redding, and if anybody knows her or the family, she was a fabulous person. And they all spoke well. And when Lawyer Redding spoke, it was like, you know, like what planet is he from? Because He sounded white.
I didn't say that.
But he was very clear. So the point I'm trying to make is when you talk about connecting the dots.
Yeah.
We all lived together. And so, there was, opportunity for everybody to know one another in terms of, Ms. Dunbar, she was a part of People's Settlement. And that's where I got my first job. So there is, and this speaks to the history that needs to be known. And Lawyer Reddy was not the only African American who got a college education early. You have W.E.B. Du Bois, he went to Harvard, he graduated in 1898. There were some other Blacks, who got, college degrees, early on. And I think the reason this history is important is because our kids need to know it. If you see it, then you know you can, then you know you can, then you know you can, then you know you can do it.
By the way, Ron, you have put articles in Black Voices. You have put an article in Black Voices.
Thank you.
About 4 issues ago.
Yes, yes, we did. Yes, yes.
This is what happens when you get old. I get it. Thank you.
Can we just give another round of applause for our? A lot of things a lot of information that I was not aware of. So now we're opening up to, questions. We'll take questions from our audience, and I believe we have some questions coming from, the Zoom as well.
No, not the Zoom.
No.
Not the Zoom.
No, just from our audience. Any questions that you want to present to, that you want to ask our presenters? No questions?
Come on. This is your chance to exercise your First Amendment right. Come on.
We have one right here.
Have a gentleman over here.
Can I see, that a lot of history that is on the, eastern side of the county.
Right.
Sussex County. I live in Laurel.
Laura.
On the western side.
Yeah.
So it seems like, it doesn't filter over, just like we always would say it would never come down below the canal.
Right.
It seems like if it does come down the canal, below the canal, it comes and stays over on the eastern side.
Right.
That is, well, I know that, Mr. Lawson has been working on that, but I still see that it's still more prevalent over here. On the poor side of Sussex. As they would say.
So as a historian and a lifelong Delawarean, in this state, there's different biases, right? There's the below the canal bias, right? And then there's certainly, the farther you go west, if you go on east or west, there are biases that exist there, but the history's there. I mean, Patty Canning and the Patty Canning gang. And it doesn't get any more, it depends on which one. There's no story more salacious than the Patty Canning gang as it relates to antebellum United States, right? And I'm sorry, his name escapes me right now, but what we call the city limits of Millsboro was once a Black man who owned a mill in Millsboro. And I'm sorry, his name is escaping me, but I came across him in the Milk Library about 25 years ago in a book that was, he could barely read the title on it. And I read about him and he was very, very wealthy. So the history's there. I think some of the bias that occurs. And then, on the eastern side, it's tied to some of the more popular people. I mean, we didn't talk about it, but you're mere miles away from where enslaved Richard Allen worked in the kitchen. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's just how it is. And I could show you the same thing in Dover. We didn't talk about Sam Burris, when we talked about Kent County, but you can't tell the story of Kent County without Sam Burris. So there are parts of our history that even we miss. I will tell you this. A lot of, particularly Seaford, Laurel, because of the way things operated at that time, right? It's not like now. We got the internet, we have multiple ways to get information instantaneous. But a lot of the history there gets tied to Caroline County, Maryland. A lot of it does. And if you go and you look at research for Caroline County, Maryland, if you know the areas that they're describing, because Maryland describes areas by mileage. Not so much the way in Delaware it was described as hundreds, right? Maryland describes it as mileage. If you know where they're talking about in Caroline County, Maryland, and you look at the mileage, a lot of that is Western Seaford.
Our Captain Thomas Gates.
Thank
I just wanted to give you that before, sorry, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Robin Fisher. Good evening, everyone, and I am from Laurel.
Yes.
Proud resident of Laurel. And as we talk about Southern Delaware, and we talk about the west side of Sussex County, we are overwrought with history. We did a bus tour, SDARJ, Southern Delaware Alliance for Racial Justice and Future, dialogue towards ending racism, which we also did a bus tour 2 weeks ago. Just for persons on the eastern side of Sussex to know the history and the Black history of the western side of Sussex, 16 miles from your doorstep.
Right.
And you need to know where you live. People moved into our area not realizing that the first person, when you looked on January the 6th in the rotunda with a Confederate flag, lives about 7 miles away from my house, in Laurel. So these are the conservative attitudes that we face. But just here in this room from Western Sussex County, you have persons who are commissioners, you have persons who were from Seaford who are commissioners, you have Bridgeville commissioners, you have Laurel commissioners. My father, for example, was the second African-American mayor in Delaware and the first in Sussex County. So we have a rich history that we want to tell, that we want to get out. And when you talk about hundreds and miles, it's because of the Mason-Dixon line and the way that Delaware and the lines were drawn and how it was mishandled and was supposedly part of Pennsylvania. That's another story. But anyway, we invite you to join our bus tour to learn about Black history in Sussex County, especially on the western side.
Sussex County is the greatest survey area of American history. Did you all hear me?
Yeah, say it.
Sussex County is the greatest survey error in American history. If you Google that, you will find out. I'll give you a clue. Go to Lower Baltimore and then into Mason-Dixon, but you will realize it was a survey error, one that we are very thankful for.
Are there any other questions? Yes. Oh, hold on, Debbie.
History is all.
First, I would like to thank you all for your presentations. My question has to do with what Levon was saying about that report that gets thinner as you go south in the state of Delaware. Can you elaborate on what needs to be done to make that section thicker? Like what should we work on? What should we work on? What do you see needing to be done in order to make that bill have more teeth?
All right, so first and foremost, right, what you gotta do is you gotta start at the most local level. You gotta get your school boards. Just the pastor is just saying here to me, you couldn't hear, but because I had the mic. You gotta go to your school boards, and you gotta ask the leadership at these school boards, what are you doing individually? See, the report is required, and they're all reported. But it is very, very telling that the farther you go south, the thinner the report is in terms of what the information is. Then the other thing y'all gotta do too, right? Start with your school board, but then follow up with the legislators. Right, because they're the ones who truly have the ability to put teeth in it. I'm gonna tell you, when I was still with the school district, one of the things that I was highly concerned about, and what I saw as I dealt with some of my counterparts in other districts who are now, most of them are gone. There are very few. I was I was actually the second diversity, equity, and inclusion officer when I was hired in 2000, and there was probably 3 left. At our height, there might have been 20 of us, 18 or 20 of us, representing 22 public school districts throughout the state of Delaware. And when I retired in November of 2025, there may have been 3. Many of them had had their classifications removed. And let me say this, Cape Logan School District had 2 out of those 3. May have been 4 then, might have been 4. Cape Logan School District had 2 out of those 4 when I retired. And so, to your point, start at the school boards.
Yeah.
Ask them what they're doing,
Yes.
and then follow up with the legislators. And then I'm just, as I was sharing, a lot of the school districts don't have the competency to do it. They don't, Cesar Rodney had a African-American history instructor on their staff. So certainly Cesar Rodney had some advantages that other school districts didn't. Cape Logan School District had a Howard graduate as one of their folks, right? So, you had these, and then up north, you had some of those same types of influences, but that's not everywhere. And, I knew some of the things that I heard from teachers was, I didn't want to make a mistake. I didn't want to make a mistake. And what I would say to those teachers is, if you couldn't execute the math curriculum well, what would you do? Would you just say, oh, I don't want to make a mistake? Or would you go through the paces to acquire the knowledge to be able to execute the math curriculum? And if you go back and you look at that Delaware law for African American history, it is a fine piece of legislation. I'm not saying because I contributed to it. It just does not have the teeth necessary to make it happen. And then another thing, so Delaware was first to pass that legislation to require the teaching of African American history mandatory in grades K through 12. After Delaware, 3 other states passed that type of legislation. So we were pioneers in that regard too.
I have a different take on the question. I think going to the school board, going to school board meetings is important.
It's on.
But I think one of the things that's absolutely necessary is for us, for parents, to read the reports, to understand what is in the various curricula and what is missing. So that when you go to a school board meeting, you're able to say in very specific terms, this content should be in the curriculum. And if they say, well, we need help in doing that, then make yourself available to help them do that. The other thing that I found interesting was I pulled together a regular group of meetings that were for the specific purpose of getting parents involved in engaging with the leads and the schools around ensuring that content that needed to be in the various curriculum it was in fact in the curriculum. And I couldn't do it. And we cannot depend on people in places to do what they're supposed to do. We have to be movers and shakers. The other thing that I found interesting was that when I talked with some of the leads, they were very aware and concerned about some of the content that was missing, but they wouldn't do anything. So I would be about telling parents, well, if you've got a concern about what's missing, go to a lead. What you call an HB 198 lead. But I couldn't feel confident in doing that because I had concerns about just how vigilant, the leads were in terms of being critical about the content that's not there. So that's my answer to your question. The second thing about the erasure of our history, the thing that I find interesting and bizarre is that part of the motivation for erasing our history is that they don't see how we have contributed to this country as an achievement.
They don't want to see.
They don't.
And when you consider the depth and breadth of our contributions as essential to what this country is, what kind of history do they in fact want? And I hope that you really listen to the quote from Senator Schmidt in terms of the attitude about who this country is for in their eyes.
Yeah.
So, as Dr. King said, the fight for freedom is hard and difficult, but we have to hang in there. And there may be a dark time, but there is, how's that saying go Galatians? Might be dark at night, but it gets dawn, light comes. So you can see how many, but we absolutely have to work together, and we have to hang in there. Okay, Dr. Black.
Let me make a few comments if I could. Dr. Saunders and I have been working with the General Assembly to get past SB 330. And we're gonna establish a statewide African American Heritage Commission and organize African Americans such as ourselves who are involved in the fight or involved in the preservation of history. And we hope we have some teeth if we can, again, do this on a statewide basis. Maybe we'll find a few teeth in Newcastle County that'll come down and put some teeth down in Sussex County. So by having this organization, we think we can get things done or better and overcome some of the missing history that is there. Another comment that was made, which is engaging the youth. And a lot of the problems, again, although we try to think that we can put on things like this, and we have a panel here working for free or not for free. I got a bottle of water and a chicken and a sandwich. So I can't say I didn't get anything out of this, but some things really can't be done for free. And in bringing the youth in it, attacking that youth problem, we're gonna have to put some money on the table, okay? So as we go forward in terms of solution, we have to say, okay, this is what we have to do, and this is what it's gonna take. And again, find money from someplace. Thank you.
Well, before we go to the next question, just first of all, that was an excellent question. Louis Brandeis, Justice Louis Brandeis, once said, the best disinfectant is light. And so when you have the kind of problems that we've been talking about here, right? Let's have press releases to the local press, all right? Let's have press releases in Sussex County. Let's talk about these slacker schools, all right? Let's identify them. Let's call them out, all right? The other thing is, I think these ideas about curriculum and what have you are wonderful ideas. I applaud them immensely, and whatever I can do, contribute. But I want you to know, just as someone who teaches law and watches the Supreme Court decisions, including some of the terrible ones that we've seen in the last couple of days, I can tell you this: any concerted effort, all right, to bring race into the curriculum or race into the consciousness is going to be declared to be unconstitutional, all right? It's going to be portrayed as favoring one group over another, as if centuries and centuries of discrimination, all right, can just be erased and there's no remedy. So in doing these sorts of things, it's important to work with groups like the NAACP, Janae Nelson at the Legal Defense Fund, and with the Delaware ACLU and other groups, all right, to make sure that when we do these things, all right, they can stand constitutional challenges. Because I will tell you, there is a concerted effort that any mention of race, any notion of race, all right, will be declared, if you can believe it, discriminatory. Sir, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to make a statement that was said a while ago. It was talked about your legislators. I worked with John Carney a few years ago, and we went camping down to Trap Pond. And I was amazed that he never believed that Trap Pond was segregated at one point in time. I'm not that old, I'm already 70, but in my lifetime, it was segregated, you know. And he said it wasn't, but I said maybe on paper it wasn't, but in reality it was. At 10 years old, I couldn't go over to the other side. So we sat down and had a conversation. And they had brought someone who was talking about the history of Trap Pond, the cypress trees and all of this. And when I asked him about it, well, he asked me what did I think about it. And I'm pretty straight with no chaser. And I said it was good for white folks, but it was not good for me because I knew black folks that you know, sent the trees down there to Fort Orange and Jamil and got them, you know, cut and stuff, but there was no mention of it. So when I told him, if you're gonna tell the history, let's tell all of the history. So then he contacted me about a couple months later, the historian that was there, Tom Summers, called me, and we worked on changing the name from Cypress Point back to Jason Beach. That's what it was when I grew up, it was Jason Beach. And he never knew that. And then when I even talked to one of my local legislators about one of the buildings in my town that we wanted to Paul Lawrence Dunbar, it was our elementary school. It was made West Lawn, then we got it changed back to Paul Lawrence Dunbar. But he did not know that the same year that the high school for the whites was built, 1921, was the same year that DuPont built our elementary school for all black school children, 1921. And my thing is, a lot of legislators, I believe, and I'm just throwing it out there to give them a break, is that they really don't know history about it. And so they make legislation according to what they know and what they feel, what they were told. So I think, I can't remember who said it, and just like I said, sir, to try to introduce things and talk to them about doing this and learning about the history, because like I said, a lot of people say it was, oh, that was a long time ago. But I'm only 70, and like I said, I couldn't go into the Dutch Inn, where my mother had been working for 20 years until I was 14. So I had to go through the back door. So it was in my lifetime. So that's what we have to get out and get to, and that's what we're telling our children in Laurel and stuff. And just like my cousin Roger Fisher was the second black mayor in Laurel. And that's history. We have a lot of good history, but it needs to be taught. Like this.
To your point about it wasn't that long ago, when I teach my students at Delaware State University, I teach them Cliff's theory of relative time. And put simply, if you lived with people who experienced certain things, it wasn't that long ago. My grandfather's father was a former slave. So slavery wasn't that long ago. I lived with people who lived with someone who experienced that. Also, to the point, what I would have said to, I'm assuming he was Governor Carney at the time. What I would have said to Governor Carney when he was like, I didn't think this was segregated. I would have said, Governor, you do realize Laurel was a sundown town. just straight no chaser. And then I also heard you say, you talked about those DuPont schools. I'm gonna drop a gem on some people here. Maybe some of you knew this, maybe some of you did not. But do you guys know why he built those schools, why he built those colored schools? I want to be careful how I say this. They're very powerful people. But as the sugar-coated version of the story goes, he wanted better schooling and education for black students. That's only a partial truth. The full truth is He was at a convention in Detroit with major industrial lights. And they made fun of him when he said where he was from. They talked about Delaware and the way people make jokes about West Virginia. And they talked about Delaware consisting of people with no education. So when he came back to Delaware, he wanted to improve the education standards in Delaware. What many of you do, if you look back into 1918, 1919-ish, he's making his way to the white school districts, and he's trying to get the white school districts to invest in a better education system. And every one of them rejected him. What he knew in relation to Delaware's racism, which speaks to why I said that Lewis Redding knew he had to have a certain temperament. What he knew about the climate of Delaware as it related to race relations and education, he knew white people in Delaware would never stand for black people having better things than white students. So he purchased that land privately and built those schools for those black students, knowing that it would force white folks to build better schools. And the net effect was he increased the education quality in the state of Delaware. Now, I want to say this too. He was not disingenuous in his actions.
No.
His family personally funded Delaware State College in the early years because the federal government has never lived up to its obligation under the second moral act.
By the way, we're going to go through a couple more questions, but one of the things about these town halls is that ideas emerge, and something just occurred to me. As I said, there would be challenges to any programs that identify race in education. And it occurred to me, the way to get around that, consistent with what has been said, is this is all about remembering all of American history.
Yeah.
Put in the word all of American history. Let me just go over to Joe here first, and I'll come back to you.
In a forum like this, there's no way in the world you can cover everything. But I just want to mention one thing to the panelists to get your reaction about it. And that is the history of free blacks prior to slavery in Delaware. This is the population, in 1860, the free black population in Delaware was 18,966 people that were free. The enslaved population was 1,798. In other words, 93% of the black folks in Delaware before the Civil War, right before the Civil War, were free. That is a testament to the African American population and West Laurel.
Yes.
West Laurel. Sundown town, West Laurel was founded by free blacks.
Yeah.
These stories don't get told, but I think it's really important to know that there was a strong free black strong set of free blacks in Delaware. We didn't get a chance to go through it. And that also tied to a strong set of allies that were Quakers that helped push this through. So that's just another point. I wanted to ask if any of the panelists had something about the free blacks in Delaware.
Yeah, there were free blacks in Delaware, but we cannot overlook this. And it's in our main issue from the Black History Timeline that in 1865, here in Delaware, the Delaware legislators passed a Jim Crow law that stated Black Delawareans were second-class citizens. It would take 88 years before that law was rescinded. 1953, the Black Code. My mother, who passed a few years ago, always told a story, and many older ones here, that you could work in Ocean City as a Black, but you could not walk that boardwalk. It was in September, cold, wearing coats. One day was Delaware Day for Blacks. One day was Maryland Day for Blacks. One day was Virginia Day for Blacks. on the boardwalk in Ocean City. In the 50s, early 60s. Ocean City. Yeah. So although there were free blacks in Delaware, on one hand we were free, on the other hand we were not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Yes.
Well, I just wanted to add to that, Marjorie, that being free, a free black in Delaware, if you read the black codes, we were far from, the free blacks were far from being free. Where one of those codes would say for anybody who lived in the city of Wilmington, who was black, and who wanted to leave the city of Wilmington or be out in the streets after a certain hour, they had to have the permission of a white boss or a white person. So being free didn't mean very much.
In connection with education in Delaware, and a lot of people don't realize that when African Americans went to school, they could only go into 11th grade in Sussex County. I can't speak on Kent and Newcastle. Which meant you weren't graduating from high school. So in order to get a 12th grade education, my mother experienced it. So we're not talking that long ago. This was in the 50s. She had to go to Delaware State University or Delaware State College so that she could graduate from high school. And so people in the south, or they had to go to other, to Jason, or not even really confident. That's how in Wilmington, Jason wasn't there at that time. So to get a 12th grade education, you had to leave your home, find somewhere to live for a year. And we're talking, these are costly things to people whose income are minimal. So it was set up to make it difficult to be educated, but they did it. That's what we have to remember. They did it. And so that's what we have to do. We have to do it. We have to be steadfast, unmovable, and we have to teach our children to do it.
Yeah.
She has just said about blacks going to school up to 11th grade. My father had to go to Delaware State in order to get his high school diploma. So he had to make arrangements for him to be able to stay with a friend in Wilmington until he completed his high school degree. So that is so true. He wasn't the only, all of his brothers had to do that. So, once again, it's a financial burden, but that was the only way that he was able to get a high school degree.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, one or two more questions, so we'll do, these two will be a last, sir.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Baxter. I'm a recent transplant from Pennsylvania, and the most I knew about Delaware was Delaware County in Pennsylvania. I'm impressed, but I'm hearing names like Joshua Parker and Lewis Redding and even Frederick Douglass. What names should I hear? Can I hear about in recent times and during the last X number of years? I know these folks go back to the 18th century and what have you. What names should I listen up for?
Well, I think in my presentation, I talked about the women who are in Lake Hall. So those are names, and they were I just listed the women. I didn't include the men because the topic, I was supposed to talk about women. But there is a Delaware legislative office, and those individuals, you should know their names. One of the things that I tried to emphasize in my presentation are ordinary people, who are overlooked when we consider the progress that African Americans have made. They weren't able to go to the grassroots organizations, but they did make sacrifices so that, for example, their kids, could go to college. And that includes the kids with whom I grew up. Now, when I went to Delaware State University, there were about 600 kids at Delaware State. the tuition was maybe $150 a semester. But at that time, that was big money. But those families had to do what was necessary in order to get us to Delaware State, you know, and through. Now, we're talking about, we just gotta do it, we just gotta do it. And what we have to ask ourselves, and the answers we have to give ourselves, are what are the things that we need to do? And if you look at the history of the Black women I shared, they were smart, they were strategic, they were planful, and they were intentional. And there was some schism in the groups, but they were unified. And for some of the people in the room, you know what I'm talking about, you know, when we can get divided, you know, based on stuff that doesn't, you know, that doesn't make sense. And so we're just going to have to work together. But I do think there is a special responsibility that white people have to say enough is enough. And join the African Americans and other groups that are being oppressed by this administration.
So
And we have to vote to get these votes.
Let's do one, since you're looking for a native Delawarean that we all celebrate, and I'm sure, and I hope everyone can celebrate this, is Brian Stevenson. He again has raised the banner of Delaware and Sussex County. And again, we are proud of what he has done, and Just Mercy, if you've seen the movie and the book and all those kinds of things, and the things he's doing down in Montgomery, Alabama to remember lynchings. And the things that took place. We are proud of what he has done.
I would nominate Bill.
So we go to the last question, ma'am.
Everyone knows Bill Collins.
My name is Ida Warren, and I'm from Seaford, Delaware. And the question I have is, and all the football, baseball, the big things, they still can say pledge allegiance to the flag. But how come now, when they took the prayer out of the schools, now everything is happening? When I was going to school, I'm 76, and we never heard tell of bringing guns and shooting and all that when we had God in school. But now they're taking them out, and now every time this happened, everybody's like, oh God, you know, whatever. Well, they took him out of the school, so that's why now the school doesn't have, you know, it doesn't have God in the school. And I want to know, why can't we put him back, just like all the games they say, the Lord's Prayer and all this kind of stuff? Why not the schools anymore?
So my response would be, so they haven't taken God out of school. Students have an individual right to pray. We do not have the right to have our educators facilitate prayer of any kind. Think about it. Our schools are diverse areas. We have multiple religious backgrounds. What does it mean to a Muslim student who is in a school where maybe the headmaster or maybe the principal is a Christian? It is not fair to that student to have to adhere to Christian principles. But there's nothing stopping the Muslim student, the Buddhist student, or the Christian student from praying. The school just can't do it. I would also say, when we talk about the shootings, they did not have AR-15 at the time that you're talking about. I'm just being clear. You couldn't get an AR-15 over the internet in the time that you're talking about. That's not a God missing from school thing. That's a devolving of American society thing.
Say this. May not be in the school. Here's the mic. Might not be in the schools, but what about prayer and God and hope? Yes. And I mean, hope and family is where everyone's at. It's like the criticisms about HB 198 not having any teeth. How, to what extent are Black families and families in general teaching Black history in homes? They don't need it. It's always a reason, a downside. So if there is a downside, what is the solution, you know, to that? You know, we have, you know, recreational centers. I mean, there is, there's YouTube, and there are all kinds of history, you know, in mass media. So there is a way for homes to have Black history, and we have to take responsibility for teaching what is not being taught in our community.
We did.
If I, before we close this, so, would you please join with me in thanking the folks at the Cinema Art Theater?
Yes.
For making this possible.
As we close, we want to thank everyone for attending. We hope that you will attend our next town hall meeting. And, I want to close by saying, repeating this quote. We must never forget that Black history is American history. The achievements of African Americans have contributed to our nation's greatness, and that's by Yvette Clarke.
Thank you very much. You just attended a history session like no other. If you won't find this anywhere in the United States, the first is in Delaware, and second, this is us. So thank you for attending. One of our next big events is going to be our gala, our 10th anniversary gala. We've been doing this for 10 years. Thank you for Ms. Charlotte King for founding this organization and leading it for so long. And please come to our gala in October 24th. Thank you very much.